This is Jason Verney's podcast. I am Jason Verney. This podcast episode is about Almost Heaven. It's a new documentary by Carol Salter. She's self-distributing this film. It's already had lots of screenings. The world premiere though was in Berlin. And not only that, the Sheffield Doc Fest, which is probably the biggest documentary festival in the UK, Chef Doc Fest, I think it is on Twitter, and Little White Lies rated it pretty high up there within the top 10 of a particular ranking. So it's getting rave reviews, and after seeing it tonight, I can see why. And not only that, I got had the pleasure basically of witnessing her speak in the Q&A and a discussion about the film, and also had a little chat with her afterwards. But basically, this film is, like she said herself, the director said, death. This is necessary. It's not all about death, but the subject of death doesn't really sell. It doesn't. It wouldn't probably get as much distribution even if it wasn't self-distributed. It's not the sort of thing that sells. But she also mentioned that the film has done really well in China where it's been screened, so that's really good as well. I mean, the film itself, I'll just tell you about this, focuses on this one girl, Ying Ling. She works, well, basically, she, like many people in China and other countries in the world, it's difficult to get a job. You have to take anything, and you could say in some degree that's the same in the UK, but it's far worse and far different in China and elsewhere, some other countries. And so she basically she's working in they refer to it as a spa, but it's kind of it's a morgue or mortician or mortuary, and they have to learn how to deal with embalming and making people look better and dealing with their family when after these people have died. So it's not an easy sell to people, although I was it was something that I was intrigued by. Perhaps that's my age, perhaps I'm getting more fascinated, but it's also a documentary. It was revealed later on that she also, she's pretty much a one man band, one woman band even, which I do touch on in a second podcast about this. I've also recorded already a sort of podcast on the go about some other aspects of this film, but I wanted to sort of start from scratch in another podcast about the film itself, the characters, and it's a documentary, but they are characters, and they're important ones, and not just dead characters. And also in that episode, I explained why it has a connection to the director personally with loss of certain people. So this girl, a particular girl, Yingling, she's working in this place. She's learning to train. They first learn how to deal with the person who's no longer with us person by using a dummy, using a sort of a false person. Then they use a kind of a member of staff, I suppose, who is fully alive. So they kind of gradually get to the point where they'll be working on a real, so if not, you could say unreal, no longer real, but no longer alive anyway, person. So it's quite interesting. It's not something that people would really want to be doing. But it's even as the director says at the beginning, she did mention that you can laugh, and indeed there was a lot of funny scenes, especially at the beginning. And that even the fact that they're using a dummy to do the practicing on, and there's a few funny moments with that, and even some humorous moments later on where an actual, a corpse, I suppose you could say, is brought in, and behind the curtains, the filmmaker, I guess, couldn't go behind these particular curtains, even though she had quite a lot of access to other areas and procedures. She didn't, and you can just hear stuff, and it sounds quite funny. It's maybe unintentionally funny, but it's very, it's well documented. And although I'd say it's a documentary, it is a documentary, but it's something that you could imagine being fiction, a work of fiction. I mean, because the story itself, it's not an everyday story that we don't tend to hear about, but also even the characters and the fact that there's a bit of bonding going on between her and another person, a guy that works there. He's quite a chirpy guy. They become really good pals, I suppose you could say, and who knows, maybe something else was going to develop. But I mean, that's another interesting aspect of the film. That's why it could potentially be a work of fiction if you didn't know better. And it could quite easily play out as a feature like that. So we're introduced to this girl. She's working there. There's quite a bit of humour. There's a bit of eeriness, of course, of the whole documentary. But the fact that they're taken to the places where the bodies are brought down, and they're walking through corridors where no one else goes, and it's kind of, well, they do go, but you just see these two alone. It's very, it is what it should be, really. It's humorous when he wants to be humorous, and it's touching. There's also touching moments when she's speaking to her family. I suppose that maybe they're not as touching as some other moments when she's having to watch other families cope with the loss of their loved ones right in front of them, But there's conversations with her and her family. She wants to, bearing in mind she's very poor, she wants to get her clothing that she already owns because winter's approaching. She doesn't want to fork out more money, spend more money on extra, generally more pricey, thicker clothes. And she wants her parents to send her the clothes to this place where she's staying. They pretty much live at the workplace, which, as far as I understood, and I think that's what was mentioned in the Q&A, I mean, that could make it a little bit more eerie as well. You're actually staying there, but it becomes, I guess, so matter-of-factly that it's just how it is. But talking about family and being poor and stuff, she asked what she'd like to do in the future, and this was also mentioned in the discussion at the end and the Q&A, when she does say to her friend, to this guy, she said, I think she talks about perhaps she talks about other jobs. I'm trying to remember what it was now, but there's one that she talks about sort of being sort of martial arts for get down villains or gangsters or something, but in reality she says that she'd like to open a shop one day. And although people do say that, lots of people in China might say that, lots of people that are poor, and I know from experience from people I've met in Thailand and other countries, that's, although it might sound like, it's opening a shop, that's a bit kind of basic, or a bit kind of, you could even go the opposite way and say it's a very sort of capitalistic idea. But really, when you could say it's basic in the fact that when we're children we play shops and we want to have a shop, but in the other way you can see it as having a shop, and it's their community thing that they think about. Family, small town, maybe community, and selling goods. And you're actually providing a service. It's about being a part of everything, and also providing things for people that they need. So from my own experience, people I know, they want to. Sometimes people I know, even in in a big, they're living in a big city, they want to go back to their old town. I mean, I'm thinking of places like maybe in Thailand, Cambodia, as probably the two places I've been to the most. I mean, maybe Vietnam as well. But those countries, they wouldn't mind going back to their town where they were from and just going back to basics, if you like, even setting up a laundrette or something that, it's just to serve the townsfolk and their families and their families' friends. So, yeah, drifting off of there a bit deliberately because I wanted to explain how that is, and it's not just a Chinese thing. It's also something. I mean, I probably remember when I was younger, thinking of running a local news agency kind of filled me with pleasure, and not because of money. It's just something that crossed my mind. You're serving people that you know. So anyway, back to the story. So there's a lovely constant bonding that's happening between this Yingling, the main girl, the only girl that really was shown, really. And there's another one in it, but we're not really introduced to her characteristics and stuff. There's bonding between the two of them, and he later on. I won't do any give away any stuff here, give away any spoilers, but he does have to disappear for a while, and as exactly as I thought, as this particular person disappears, whether it's for the whole film, whether it's for a little bit, whether it's for the whole of her life or just a little bit. As I say, I want to keep it ambiguous there because I don't like to give spoilers. I think I was almost thinking the same as what the director said, that she was kind of thinking about as well, which was when that person leaves, then Ying Ling's character, the main girl who's working there, she also, it's kind of her first, it's another loss. She's alone again, and not only that, she's alone, and now she's struggling on her own. It's almost like a life lost from her life, because he's gone from that mortuary or this place. Something I'll mention now is something I could have mentioned at the beginning, but I deliberately didn't want to. I had read the film, that she's sorry, I say you don't know because I haven't said yet, but basically that she has a fear of ghosts. That does come up, but it's not. It is kind of, I suppose, it is one of the selling points of the line or one in the synopsis, but it doesn't come to you immediately. First of all, she's just a nervous girl learning the ropes, and it's introduced in quite a few scenes in. I think, she has that fear, so that's kind of a pulling point to get for an audience to actually be intrigued. Wow, it's a girl who works in a mortuary, a morbid place, and she's also afraid of ghosts, and the afterlife or ghost plays a big part in China to many people. So it's kind of a added pull, to keep you interested. Just that's what intrigued me as well. Not just the fact that it's based in that kind of environment, and you do learn a little bit. I mean, not that I really want to work there, but you do learn about how they have to deal with things in those places. But the good thing is it does turn into the human stories as well between these two, also between her and her, I believe it's her boss. Perhaps she's not always doing stuff correctly, or he doesn't think there is. You can detect some bitterness at one point towards the end. And it's very emotional, especially when you see her reacting to the families reacting, or to them actually doing their speeches while they've got their loved ones there. Lots of tears. I mean, it's reminding me a bit of. I've been to South Korea 6 times, and I'm documenting certain aspects of it, and when I've watched videos of communal Han or suffering, or people in just floods of tears and in unison. I mean, maybe a bit less. What's the word? A bit less obvious, or a bit less concealed than we would in the UK, perhaps. In a service, the family, the extended family, maybe even the friends, they're all very, very loudly emotional, and who can blame them? But it's just it's something I did notice. The Chinese, Korean element as well. Going back, talking about the director's shots, they're very, very good, of the corridors and the lift which brings the body or dummy or whatever there is coming into the place for them to work on. Something I better mention. And there's just because I'll probably forget otherwise. There's a bit where there's some vehicles are coming in, and above the building, I think, or above where the vehicles go through, it says no vehicles without corpses past this place, and the audience kind of chuckled to that. I mean, it's true. I mean, this is all in Chinese, in Mandarin. So this is obviously that's the English translation. And incidentally, the director not being able to speak Mandarin or not knowing Chinese gestures and things, is quite a task for her to take on. So you have to admire her for that. It's an incredible piece of work, especially when you consider that she did pretty much this herself. She visited China a few times, mostly on a tourist visa, which I do briefly mention in another small episode of another part to this review. I think it has everything, and as I say, it could easily have been a work of fiction. I mean, it's it's a human story, and it's got, like I say in the other episode, it's got lots of elements and lots of layers, but not in the way you might think. It just has lots of different, the stories with the friendship, her problems surviving, hence working there, what she wants to be, what she can't be. Even in this job, in this scene, in a certain scene, that she's seen to be marked down for a couple of things, I believe, that she's not done correctly with these bodies, or even they might have been dummies. I can't remember this particular scene. And you have to think, people getting marked down for a job that it's not really a job she wants to be doing. So even to get marked down for something that you're doing just because you need to do it, must be a weird feeling. I don't know how she would feel. I won't reveal the ending or the way the story changes, but there's, she's stuck working there. Of course, she dreams to get out of there, even though she seems to be a very willing employee. She does do everything they say, as difficult as it might be. So as I say, I am continuing this in another podcast, which I have already recorded. So it's just touching on other elements to it. This was more about the story and what's involved in the characters and the like. But the other episode touched on other things connected to the director's intentions, connected to me, connected to my sort of maybe parallel life situations to the directors and to stuff in this film. And there could be a part 3 of this, because I might have to touch on something else, which was screening itself at the Lexi cinema, which I've talked about recently in other podcasts, or I've written about on my website, minimovie.com. What I probably should mention, thinking about it, is the various places where you can find more out about this film. I mean, on Twitter, it's Almost Heaven Doc. So it's Twitter. If you're using a URL, it's twitter.com/almost heaven doc, and on Facebook it's Almost Heaven Film. And the website for this particular film is www.almost-heaven-film.com. So it's www.almostheavenfilm, but with a line in between each, or hyphen.com. And it's I did notice there's at least one hashtag on Instagram which is the same, Almost Heaven Film. There's probably others. So I would recommend it. It's been doing the rounds. I believe it's next at the Ritzy and somewhere else, but it's been doing the rounds in London. I'm sure it's going to be seen many other places. As I say, it's not a too long film either. It's 72 minutes. It's made this year. It's in Mandarin. with English subtitles. But it's as I say, it's not too much. It's not too strenuous. It's an hour and just over an hour and 10 minutes. It doesn't, it's not too long. And in fact, I could have watched it for longer, to be honest. So I'll leave it at that. And if you hear the other part of this little kind of, pondering, wandering review, feel free to send a message. If it's, I don't know, if you listen to this on iTunes, then fair enough. If you could find a way to do that, or if you listen / play it on YouTube, and just leave a comment underneath if you like. Otherwise, I'll speak to you in the next podcast. Okay, adios.